What would you do? Husband wants open marriage after I carried us financially while chronically ill. Hey everyone, welcome back to this channel. I'm sharing this because I honestly don't know what to do anymore, and I need your perspective. This is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to talk about, but maybe hearing from all of you will help me figure out my next steps. My name is Sarah, and I've been married to my husband Jake for 8 years. When we first got together, everything seemed perfect. He was charming, ambitious, and we shared so many dreams about our future. We talked about traveling the world, buying a house, maybe having kids someday. Life felt full of possibilities, but about 3 years ago, everything started to change. First, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. If you don't know what these conditions are, imagine feeling like you have the flu every single day, but add constant muscle pain that feels like someone's been beating you with a baseball bat. Some days, just getting out of bed feels impossible. The fatigue isn't just being tired, it's like your body is running on a completely dead battery, and no amount of sleep fixes it. The diagnosis was devastating. I'd always been the energetic one in our relationship, the one who planned weekend adventures, worked out regularly, and could handle anything life threw at me. Suddenly, I was struggling to make it through a normal workday without collapsing. Jake seemed supportive at first. He'd make me tea when I was having bad days, and he'd tell me we'd figure it out together. I thought we were a team. I really believed that our marriage vows meant something, in sickness and in health and all that. Around the same time my health issues started, Jake lost his job. The company he worked for was downsizing, and unfortunately, he was one of the casualties. It wasn't his fault, and I completely understood how devastating that must have been for him. We agreed that he'd take some time to find the right opportunity rather than just jumping into any job. What I didn't expect was that some time would turn into over a year. At first, I was patient. The job market can be tough, and I wanted him to find something he'd be happy with. I was still working full-time at that point, even though my health was declining. I work as a nurse at a local hospital, and let me tell you, 12-hour shifts on your feet when you have chronic pain and fatigue is absolutely brutal. But someone had to pay the bills, right? Our savings were dwindling fast, and my health insurance through work was the only thing keeping us afloat, especially with all my medical expenses. So I pushed through, day after day, even on the days when I could barely stand. Meanwhile, Jake's job search seemed to become less and less of a priority. In the beginning, he'd spend hours every day updating his resume, applying for positions, and going to interviews. But as the months went by, I started noticing that he was spending more time playing video games than looking for work. When I'd come home from a brutal shift, exhausted and in pain, he'd be exactly where I left him that morning, on the couch with a controller in his hands. I tried to be understanding. I know unemployment can be depressing and demoralizing. I'd encourage him, help him practice for interviews, and even used my connections to try to get him leads. But nothing seemed to stick. The worst part was coming home to a messy house every single day. I'd work a 12-hour shift, barely able to function from pain and exhaustion. And I'd walk into a kitchen full of dirty dishes, laundry piling up, and Jake asking what was for dinner. I started having conversations with him about sharing household responsibilities. I explained that with my health issues and working full-time, I really needed his help keeping up with things at home. He'd always agree and promise to do better, but nothing ever changed. So I found myself in this horrible cycle. Wake up in pain, force myself to work a 12-hour shift on my feet, come home to a messy house, clean and cook dinner while Jake played games, then collapse into bed only to do it all over again the next day. Weekends were just catch-up time for all the household tasks I couldn't get to during the week. I started feeling resentful, which made me feel guilty. Here was my husband, struggling with unemployment and probably depression, and I was angry at him. But I was so tired, you guys. I was tired in my bones, tired in my soul. There were days I'd cry in my car before walking into the hospital because I didn't know how I was going to make it through. Another shift. My health continued to deteriorate. The stress of being the sole provider while managing chronic illness was taking a serious toll. I was having more frequent flare-ups, my pain levels were increasing, and I was starting to make mistakes at work because of the brain fog that comes with my conditions. I tried talking to Jake about how much I was struggling. I told him that I needed him to step up, that I was at my breaking point. He'd always respond with understanding words. He'd say he knew I was doing too much, that he appreciated everything I was doing, that he'd do better. But words without action started to feel meaningless. Around the 6-month mark of his unemployment, I suggested he consider taking a temporary job while continuing to look for something in his field. We were falling behind on bills, and I was working overtime shifts just to keep us afloat. He said he didn't want to take just any job because it might interfere with his job search and make him look desperate to potential employers. I understood his reasoning, but meanwhile, I was literally working myself into the ground. There were nights I'd come home and just sit in my car for 20 minutes because I didn't have the energy to walk into the house and face more responsibilities. By month 9, Jake's unemployment benefits had run out. I was now carrying 100% of our financial burden while dealing with chronic illness and doing all the housework. I started picking up even more overtime shifts, which meant I was working sometimes 60 hours a week. My friends and family started expressing concern. My mom would call and I'd sound exhausted, and she'd ask if Jake was helping out. I found myself making excuses for him, saying he was having a hard time and that I was managing fine. But I wasn't managing fine. I was drowning. The breaking point came about 13 months into Jake's unemployment. I had worked 7 12-hour shifts in a row because one of my coworkers had called in sick and I couldn't afford to turn down the overtime. I came home on that 7th day barely able to walk. My pain levels were through the roof, and I was so exhausted I was seeing spots. I walked into our apartment to find Jake exactly where I'd left him that morning, on the couch, playing video games, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and soda cans. The kitchen was a disaster, there were no clean clothes, and I just broke down. I stood there in the doorway and started sobbing. Jake finally looked up from his game and asked what was wrong. What was wrong? I had been working myself to death for over a year while he sat on the couch, and he was asking what was wrong. I told him I couldn't do it anymore. I said I needed him to get any job, literally any job, to help with our finances. And I needed him to start taking care of our home. I wasn't asking him to do everything, just to meet me halfway. He got defensive and said I was being unfair, that he was dealing with depression and that finding work wasn't as easy as I made it sound. He said I was adding to his stress and making it harder for him to get motivated. I felt like I was going crazy. Here I was, working myself into the ground while managing chronic illness, and somehow I was the one making things harder for him. But here's where the story takes a turn that I never, ever saw coming. About 2 weeks after that conversation, Jake sat me down and said he had something important to discuss. I thought maybe he'd finally gotten a job lead or had come to his senses about helping around the house. Instead, he told me that he'd been doing some thinking about our relationship and our marriage. He said that over the past year, he'd realized that his needs weren't being met in our relationship. He felt like we weren't connecting physically or emotionally anymore, and he thought it was affecting his mental health and his ability to get back on his feet. I was confused at first. I asked him what he meant and how we could work on reconnecting. I suggested couples therapy or maybe planning some date nights once our finances improved, but that's not where he was going with this conversation. Jake told me that he thought we should consider opening our marriage. He said he'd been researching polyamory and open relationships online, and he thought it might be exactly what we needed to revitalize our connection. He said that having the freedom to explore connections with other people might help him feel more fulfilled and motivated in all areas of his life. I literally couldn't speak for a full minute. I kept waiting for him to say he was joking, but he was completely serious. Here I was, working 60-hour weeks while chronically ill, doing all the housework, supporting us financially. And he thought the problem with our marriage was that he needed to sleep with other people. I asked him if he was serious, and he said he'd never been more serious about anything. He'd even looked into local polyamory groups and dating apps for people in open relationships. He said he thought I might benefit from it too, that maybe seeing other people would help me be less stressed and uptight about our situation. The audacity was breathtaking. I asked him how exactly he planned to date other people when he didn't have a job, a car that reliably ran, or money to take anyone anywhere. His response: he said he'd figured I could help him out with dating expenses, since I was the one with the income, and that it would be an investment in our marriage. I don't think I've ever felt rage like what I felt in that moment. This man had been unemployed for over a year while I worked myself into the ground. He hadn't lifted a finger to help maintain our household. He'd watched me struggle with chronic illness and exhaustion without offering any real support. And now he wanted me to financially subsidize his dating life because his needs weren't being met. I told him absolutely not. I said the idea was insulting and hurtful, and that if he wanted to improve our marriage, he could start by getting a job and helping around the house. But Jake didn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, he kept bringing it up. He'd send me articles about successful open marriages and polyamory. He'd tell me about couples he'd read about online who had revitalized their relationships this way. He said I was being close-minded and that I wasn't considering what might be best for both of us. He even suggested that my chronic illness was affecting my libido and emotional availability, and that an open marriage would take the pressure off me to meet all his needs while I was dealing with health issues. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor. The more he pushed, the more I realized how far apart we'd grown. This wasn't the man I'd married. The man I'd married would never have watched me struggle for over a year without stepping up to help. He would never have suggested that I financially support his quest to date other women while I was barely keeping us afloat. I started wondering if there was already someone else. Was this whole open marriage thing just a way to legitimize an affair that was already happening? When I asked him directly, he swore there wasn't anyone else, but honestly, I'm not sure I believe him anymore. The situation has been going on for about a month now, and I feel like I'm at a complete breaking point. Jake is still unemployed. He's still not helping around the house, and now, on top of everything else, he's pressuring me daily about opening our marriage and making me feel like I'm the problem for not being open-minded and new. My health is worse than it's ever been. The stress of this situation has triggered the worst flare-up I've had since my diagnosis. I'm having trouble concentrating at work, I'm not sleeping, and I feel like I'm having a mental breakdown. I've started secretly looking at apartments I could afford on my own, but with my medical expenses and the debt we've accumulated during Jake's unemployment, I'm not sure I can make it work financially. The thought of starting over at this point in my life, while dealing with chronic illness, is terrifying, but I also can't keep living like this. I feel like I'm disappearing. Like I've become nothing more than a paycheck and a housekeeper to someone who doesn't respect or appreciate anything I do. Some of my friends say I should have given him an ultimatum months ago: get a job or get out. Others say I should consider couples therapy before making any major decisions. My sister thinks Jake is having some kind of mental health crisis and that I should try to get him professional help. But honestly, I'm so exhausted and hurt that I don't know if I have anything left to give to this marriage. The open marriage conversation was like the final straw. It made me realize that Jake and I have completely different values and completely different ideas about what marriage means. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. Maybe unemployment really has affected his mental health more than I understand. Maybe his open marriage idea is coming from a place of desperation rather than selfishness. Maybe I haven't been emotionally available enough because of my health issues. But then I think about everything I've sacrificed over the past year. I think about working through pain levels that should have had me in bed. I think about coming home to a messy house every single day and cleaning it without complaint. I think about the overtime shifts I worked to keep us afloat while he played video games. And then I think about him asking me to fund his dating life, and I get angry all over again. I keep going back and forth between feeling guilty for wanting to leave and feeling angry that I've put up with this situation for so long. Some days I think maybe we can work through this if Jake finally gets serious about finding work and contributing to our household. Other days I think the damage to our relationship is too severe to repair. The hardest part is that I still love him, or at least I love the person he used to be. I miss the partnership we had before everything fell apart, but I'm starting to wonder if that person even exists anymore, or if I was just fooling myself about who he really was. I'm also scared about what my life would look like if I left. Dating with chronic illness seems impossible. Starting over financially when I'm already struggling seems overwhelming. But staying in this situation is literally killing me. I can feel it affecting my health every single day. So that's where I am right now. I have a husband who's been unemployed for over a year, who doesn't help around the house, who watches me work myself to death while dealing with chronic illness, and who thinks the solution to our marital problems is for him to start dating other women on my dime. I need to make a decision soon because I can't keep living in this limbo, but I honestly don't know what the right choice is. What would you do in my situation? Have any of you dealt with something similar? Am I being unreasonable for not wanting to consider an open marriage? Should I give Jake another chance to change? Or is it time to cut my losses and move on? I really need your perspective because I feel like I've lost all objectivity about my own situation. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you've been in a similar situation, I'd love to hear how you handled it. Thanks for listening to my story. It feels good to finally get this all out there, even if I don't know what comes next. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't let anyone convince you that your needs don't matter. Sarah.